Ethan Gray had always been a man of contrasts. To the world, he was the young and charismatic CEO of Gray Enterprises, worth billions. But beneath the luxurious suits and polished charm was a man haunted by his past. A boy who had grown up in a small, broken-down house, counting coins to buy his mother medicine. That boy had promised himself two things: to never let anyone suffer like his family had, and to never be loved for his wealth alone. When Ethan met Amelia Rose, everything changed. She wasn't like the women he'd encountered before, those who saw dollar signs instead of a heart. Amelia was warm, funny, and driven, with a passion for her art that lit up the room. Their whirlwind romance felt genuine, but a part of Ethan couldn't shake the question. Was it him she loved or the life he offered? The doubt gnawed at him. And one evening, as Amelia laughed at one of his terrible jokes, he made a decision. He needed to know the truth. A month before their engagement party, Ethan sat Amelia down in the cozy living room of his penthouse. His expression was heavy, his usual confidence replaced with something vulnerable. "Amelia," he began, his voice unsteady, "there's something I need to tell you." Amelia's smile faltered. "What's wrong?" "I've lost everything," he said, letting the weight of those words hang in the air. "The company, the assets, everything. I'm bankrupt." For a moment her face was unreadable, a mix of confusion and shock. "How? When?" "It doesn't matter how," Ethan said, lowering his gaze. "What matters is that I need to know if you're still with me." Amelia sat in stunned silence, her hands trembling slightly. Ethan studied her every movement, every expression, searching for clues. Then she reached out, placing her hand over his. "Ethan, I'm not with you because of money. I love you for you." Her words soothed him, but her tone carried a hesitation he couldn't ignore. Ethan nodded, pretending to believe her, but inside, the test had just begun. The next day, Ethan disappeared. He left no explanation, only a brief note. "I need time to figure things out." Amelia was devastated, her calls unanswered and messages ignored. Little did she know Ethan was watching from afar, disguised as a taxi driver in her bustling city. Ethan's plan was simple: blend into her world and see her life without him in it. But what he discovered wasn't what he expected. One evening, as he waited outside her apartment building, he saw a man leaving. A charming, well-dressed man named Marcus, her old friend from college. Jealousy flared within Ethan, but he pushed it down. He had to know if Marcus was just a friend or something more. Over the next week, Ethan followed her to her art studio, to coffee shops, and to Marcus's gallery opening. Each time the conversations between Amelia and Marcus seemed harmless, but doubt still clouded Ethan's mind. Then came the twist Ethan hadn't planned for. One evening, as Amelia stood on a quiet bridge, staring out at the city lights, Ethan's cab pulled up beside her. She didn't recognize him under the scruffy hat and sunglasses. "Need a ride?" he asked, his voice slightly altered. She hesitated but nodded. As they drove, Ethan couldn't resist asking, "Tough night?" She sighed. "You could say that. I was engaged to this incredible man, but he disappeared. He said he lost everything, but I didn't care about that. I just wanted him." Her voice cracked. "And now, I don't know if he'll ever come back." Ethan's heart ached, but before he could respond, Amelia added something that stopped him cold. "Marcus offered to help me financially, but I turned him down. I won't take money from anyone. I want to stand on my own feet, even if it means struggling." Ethan tightened his grip on the wheel. The test he'd set for her was backfiring. It wasn't just her love for him that was being tested. It was his own faith in her. Ethan couldn't sleep that night, Amelia's words echoed in his mind, dismantling the walls of doubt he'd built around his heart. He realized he had misjudged her, and with each passing moment, his guilt deepened. But how could he return to her now, after everything he'd put her through? Determined to make things right, Ethan planned a heartfelt gesture. Disguised as the same taxi driver, he continued to observe her for the next week, noting the subtle ways she carried her pain. She would sit alone in her art studio, staring at a blank canvas, her eyes brimming with unspoken emotion. One evening, while driving past her favorite park, he noticed her standing near a street vendor, holding a bouquet of sunflowers. He stopped the cab and approached her, unable to resist the pull of her presence. "You seem to like those flowers," he said, keeping his disguise intact. She turned, smiling faintly. "They remind me of someone who used to brighten my days." Ethan's heart clenched. "Do you still love him?" Her gaze dropped to the bouquet. "With all my heart. But love isn't always enough, is it?" Before Ethan could respond, a familiar voice called her name. It was Marcus, striding toward them with an expensive watch glinting under the streetlights. Ethan froze, watching as Marcus offered Amelia a handkerchief, noticing the tear she had wiped hastily. "You deserve better," Marcus said softly, his tone laced with intention. Amelia took a step back. "Marcus, I appreciate your concern, but I've made my choice. I don't need better. I just need him." Ethan's chest tightened. It was time to end the charade. The following week, Amelia received an invitation to a charity gala. The invitation was unsigned, but the location, Grey Tower, sparked hope in her heart. She arrived wearing a simple yet elegant dress, her eyes scanning the grand ballroom for any sign of Ethan. As the evening unfolded, a speech began over the microphone. She recognized the voice immediately. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ethan said, stepping into view, his suit perfectly tailored, his eyes searching the crowd. "Tonight's event is not just about giving back. It's about recognizing the people who stand by us even in our darkest hours." Amelia's breath hitched as his gaze locked onto hers. He descended the stage, the room falling silent as he approached her. "I owe you an apology," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "I lied to you, tested you, and disappeared when you deserved better. I thought I needed proof that your love wasn't tied to my wealth. But the truth is, I was the one who failed the test. I doubted the purest thing in my life. You." Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, "Why, Ethan?" "Because I was scared," he admitted. "Scared of being loved for the wrong reasons, scared of losing myself. But watching you these past weeks, seeing your strength, your loyalty, I realized I was wrong. You never needed my money. You just needed me." The crowd erupted into applause as Ethan dropped to one knee, holding out a ring that sparkled like the stars. Amelia rose. "Will you marry me? Not as the billionaire, but as the flawed, foolish man who loves you with everything he has." Tears streamed down her face as she nodded. "Yes, Ethan. 1,000 times yes." Later that night, as they stood on the rooftop of Grey Tower looking out over the city, Amelia turned to him. "I knew, you know." Ethan frowned. "Knew what?" "That you were testing me," she said, smirking. "I found out weeks ago when one of your friends slipped up. I decided to play along because I wanted to show you that love isn't something you test. It's something you trust." Ethan stared at her, stunned, before bursting into laughter. "You're incredible. And you're lucky I love you," she teased, leaning in into him. As they held each other under the starlit sky, Ethan realized he had finally found what he'd been searching for. Not just true love, but someone who saw him for who he truly was.